لا لسه شويه. طب ممكن تخلي لي الناس اللي بره يجوا؟
حطيتها الباوربوينت مش كوب 27
دكتور اسماعيل، دكتور اسماعيل، دكتور انا هنا. Oh, and did you go after that?
I was here from 1999 to 2002 when I left.
But you did not go to Cairo afterwards. Big difference. Did you go to
Well, I
Cairo?
went last week.
Okay. Okay. So did you notice the big difference? It's another city, completely different city. More people, more roads, more it's becoming flyovers and all this. Yes. Honestly, 6 months ago, I was in the States because I have a connection with Washington. As I told you. I went to Washington for 2 weeks. I came back. Honestly, I missed my way to my office. Can you imagine? Because they changed the road within the 2 weeks. That when I was going, driving, smoothly, without thinking, I don't put Google. Why I put Google? And then all of a sudden, I found the roads. Where am I? Where is my office? And I had to use Google to go around it. But anyway, things are changing weekly in Cairo and in many places in the country. Sisi decided to put a lot of emphasis on the infrastructure. That's his, anyway.
It's not a bad thing, but it can't be the only thing.
Yeah, so we'll see. I think that this will make... Yes. If he wants to do it from here, as you like.
Since I'm leaving and since I'm going to sit down afterwards,
I will be after okay, but you can sit here and then when you leave, Robin join you.
you want me to start here?
Okay, and the mics are working. Ahlan wa sahlan, masā al-khair, good afternoon. Thank you very much for joining us today. I know, or no, this evening actually, I know it's a little bit late, but I'm happy to see a good number of participants to this side event. As you can see in our title of the side event, we are talking about minimizing the unintended consequences of climate change mitigation adaptation policies, and we are putting the case study on the Nile. The whole idea that we all know that the Nile Basin has many challenges when it comes to climate change, and it is going to affect many countries. I come from Egypt, and I know how much it could cost Egypt with any climate change that will affect the amount of water that we get in the Nile, a country that depends on 95% almost of its water resources comes from the Nile. So this is why we have been always talking about the climate and the Nile in the Nile Basin, and how it's important that we have to take it into our policies and into also our actions. But while we were thinking about this, we also got to know that there are sometimes when we take actions in areas of mitigation and adaptation, we might take some, or we can reach some consequences that we don't want to have in our plans or our policies. And this is why this is a very unique session in which we would like to hear from our experts and also from the different partners here, and also from you as audience, how we can minimize these unintended consequences. The session is co-organized by the RTI International from Virginia University with the Nile Basin Discourse, the regional office in Entebbe, and also, of course, with the Sudanese Environment Conservation Society. Actually, the RTI and SEX is the Sudanese Environment Conservation Society. They are both the leaders of this session in cooperation with RAED, the Arab Network for Environment and Development, which I very proud to be representing here. And my name is Emad Adly, for those who we did not meet before. And we also do this in cooperation with, as I said, with the Nile Basin Discourse in Entebbe in Uganda. Without further ado, I would like to start by giving the welcoming remarks to Mr. Paul Weinsfeld. Mr. Weinsfeld is the Executive Vice President of the RTI International. So please join us.
Thank you so much for that introduction, and thanks to everyone for joining us tonight. It's a real pleasure. It seems pretty loud. Is that okay? It's a real pleasure to be here at this event on unintended consequences of climate change mitigation and adaptation practices. RTI is very proud to co-host this event with RAED and with the Sudanese Environmental Conservation Society. As you all heard, I'm Paul Weisenfeld. I lead the international development practice at RTI International. The Research Triangle Institute is a nonprofit global organization headquartered in the Research Triangle Park in North Carolina. We do projects in 80 countries, and we do research and implementation development work in a wide range of disciplines, and climate change is one of the priorities for us, really understanding the impacts and effects of climate change and helping drive policy solutions on how to move forward to mitigate and adapt. We all know that COP27 is an implementation event. It's focused on how do we have concrete action to carry through on the pledges that have been made over the years. COP26 in Glasgow really focused on significant pledges, and we're here this week and next week to talk about implementation. As we move forward in implementation, one of the key things to understand is, are there unintended consequences to the actions we're taking? Are the actions which are intended to reduce emissions, which are intended to help people adapt, do they, in an unintended manner, cause negative impacts on people and communities? And we really want to move forward in a way that shows a deep understanding of what the consequences are before we take action. And that's what we're going to hear about from our panel today. In particular, we know that climate solutions in this world can't be effective unless they're equitable. We've seen that the negative impacts of extreme climate events often affect people who are most vulnerable, people who are the least able to adapt and have the least capacity for resilience. So it's critical to ensure that the actions that we take don't have unintended consequences that exacerbate those kinds of inequalities. Negative impacts of climate actions, we don't want them to leave people more vulnerable to climate change, more vulnerable to resilience, less able to bounce back and to have negative impacts on their livelihoods. At RTI, our approach is that we focus on climate solutions that are grounded in science, because we're a science-based research organization, and solutions that are locally led, because we know that's the only way you can have sustainable consequences. We tailor solutions to the particular context. It's important to understand the consequences and understand the context so that solutions can be sustainable and can have real impact. So we're looking forward to the conversation tonight. We have diverse perspectives. We're proud to partner with RAED and with the Sudanese Environmental Conservation Society. Thank you for letting me give some welcome remarks.
Thank you very much, Paul, for this. And without further ado, I would ask Ms. Rawan Omar from the Sudanese Environment Conservation Society to come and give also a welcoming remarks. Do I see Verdi here? Verdi? Oh, you are here. Come here, Verdi. Come and sit here. Come here. Closer. Come closer. Please. Rawan.
Thank you, Dr. Emad. Distinguished audience, dear panelists, greetings and good evening to all of you. I would like to take this opportunity to thank our co-organizers, RTI International and RAED Network for Environment and Development. The Sudanese Environment Conservation Society is a national NGO concerned with environmental rehabilitation and conservation and the achievement of sustainable development through popular participation. It was established in 1975 and has over 10,000 members and has 118 branches all throughout Sudan. Throughout the mobilization of effective popular participation, we have been working diligently towards this end. We work for environmental rehabilitation, sound management, and rational utilization of natural resources. Highlighting the case study of our panel discussion today, the Nile seasonal water availability has a significant impact on development operations. We're sure that technologies created for the Nile Basin Initiative can continue to enhance the lives of millions of Africans who should raise the degree of data exchange and cooperation. The management of the Nile Basin offers the opportunity to improve adaptation, but doing so necessitates careful planning. Taking an inclusive view of the impacts of the multiple outcomes, such as agriculture, energy, poverty, and environment across multiple countries can provide a more complete picture of the potential impact. I hope our discussion today inspires ideas and discussions, and I hope you will enjoy the exciting speakers that are to come. Thank you.
I feel very proud when I see the welcoming remarks coming from the United States and then from Sudan, and now I go to Rwanda. Verdi, where are you? Come. She is the chair of the Nile Basin Discourse, a civil society engagement in the Nile Basin, and I am very proud to be one of the founders of the MBD almost 20 years ago.
Thank you so much, Doctor. Distinguished participants, invited guests, ladies and gentlemen, good evening. It gives me a great pleasure and honor to be in front of this audience this evening, today. On behalf of the Nile Basin Discourse and on my own behalf, I would like to thank the organizer of this side event for giving me the opportunity, the opening remark to the title of this event. My special thanks to Egypt NDFs for inviting to this COP 2027. Thank you so much. As the chairperson of the Nile Basin Discourse, I found the topic very relevant and timely, as well as within the operation mandates of my organization, the Nile Basin Discourse. Climate change is one of the most complex problems our world faces today. The complexity comes partly from the impact of climate change itself, and partially from the unintended consequences and mitigation and adaptation policies and strategies that could and would otherwise affect our society. The Nile River is shared amongst 11 African countries, and these countries have various needs and priority, national interests, and solutions each country chooses to deploy to climate change vary accordingly. Unfortunately, so far, the Nile Basin countries don't have a harmonized policy and strategy to climate mitigation and adaptation. This makes the matter complex in our region. Within most of the Nile Basin countries, including my country, coordination between ministerial offices, departments, and sectors are lacking or weak. This affects countries' ability to better characterize and anticipate the resulting impacts of national climate mitigation and adaptation policy and strategies. What is even worse is lack of effective involvement of all stakeholders in the climate mitigation and adaptation policies and strategy formulations. I believe that policymakers should involve all sectors and stakeholders while prioritizing sustainable national climate mitigation and adaptation solutions. Particularly, involving local communities is a critical essential in designing sustainable mitigation and adaptation solutions. Ladies and gentlemen, why I am emphasizing on this involvement of local communities in this venture is primarily because unintended consequences of mitigation and adaptation policies and the strategies largely affect local communities. Not only this, I strongly believe that sustainable solutions for climate impacts will come from the communities themselves. If they are not fully involved, any mitigation and adaptation measures government takes without the involvement of communities may bring short-term benefits, but cannot bring long-term solutions. The Nile Basin Discourse has been aggressively advocating for cooperation among the Nile Basin countries and for the involvement of the Nile communities in the Nile cooperation processes, as well as in mitigation and adaptation policy and strategy development. In the absence of these two things, we cannot build climate resilience Nile society. I wish you all fruitful discussion and successful deliberation. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for this welcoming remarks, and also you reminded us that the multi-stakeholder approach that we are trying to do always in the Nile Basin discourse is this is how we also organize this session. We have from the governments, and we have from the civil society, and we have from the academia, and this is, at least the model that we are happy to have. Now let me go quickly and to listen to our first presentation from Dr. Robert Beach. From the RTI International, Dr. Robert is going to tell us globally how we can look at the unintended consequences from the scientific point of view, and I'm happy to have you. You want to do it from there? No, please. Whatever you prefer. You want to come here? Please. Yes, please.
All right. Thank you. I'm honored to be here tonight with all of you. And so before we get more into the case study of the Nile Basin that the other panelists are going to focus on, I was going to introduce a bit from just a broader perspective and based on our own experience conducting research around a number of environmental issues, climate change and other environmental topics. I mean, certainly, as others have already noted in this session, climate change is extremely complex, and actions designed to improve adaptation or to mitigate can have many consequences across different outcome measures. Greenhouse gas reductions may also result in improvements in air quality and have other benefits. So you could have both beneficial, positive impacts as well as negative impacts that could result. Things like improved productivity of agriculture, improved seeds. Clearly there are benefits in terms of improving improving productivity, improving outputs, but at the same time it may increase demand for water, increase water stress in areas that now are more intensively grown and they're using more pesticides and more fertilizers. You may have impacts on water quality as well as on increased demand for irrigation water. And very broadly, one of the key considerations, I think, in trying to capture these impacts, get ahead of unintended consequences that might result, is to think broadly, holistically, in a systems approach, take integrated modeling to try to consider, before taking action, what are the impacts that might result on economic activity, on different populations, on water use, biodiversity, and to try to anticipate and plan ahead. And then another piece of that, though, is also maintaining some flexibility in programs as they're being implemented, to enable trying to monitor and adjust sometimes where necessary. I think an important component is designing, monitoring, searching, identifying what are the broader impacts of your project as it's being implemented, and having it as part of your monitoring and evaluation system as the investment is implemented, having a results framework that's tracking that and potentially making adjustments midstream to reflect if impacts that weren't anticipated start to be realized. And again, it's really important to be able to do that, to have a system in place where you're collecting evidence, you are monitoring, say what is happening to water quality or water withdrawals, or what are the implications of changes in water withdrawals for one use on other uses or on fisheries. But have the evidence, review data. But as someone else had referenced, it's also just extremely important to engage with stakeholders and experts. You're probably not going to find all the information you need. You're surely not going to find all the information you need just in available data or in published research. It's just absolutely vital to engage with stakeholders to avoid again, to help identify and mitigate unintended consequences that may result that, that you hadn't anticipated. Again, I mean, things like introduction of bioenergy, right, where there's expansion of the use of bioenergy. I mean, you're replacing fossil fuels, some environmental benefits from that standpoint, but at the same time, again, you're increasing demand for land. You may have impacts on biodiversity, you could lead to clearing forest. Again, there's many examples of well-intended environmental policies that also have other impacts that, again, are just really important to consider. Again, like I said, I mean, it's very important to consider broad integrated systems, try to assess what the impacts are across these different, across different outcomes. Now I want to let you hear from all of the Nile River Basin experts that we have on the panel that are, dive more specifically into this, into that specific case study and ways that they are looking at, at impacts broadly and assessing how, how management can be designed to sort of efficiently, effectively maximize benefits across multiple outcomes.
I think this was a very good beginning to tell us how we have to think. It's the whole thing about the way of thinking while you are doing your adaptation or mitigation policies. You have to put in mind all the different aspects and not to forget. Otherwise, you will later you will regret what you have done. I'm still moving from the regional. From the global to regional, and I would like to welcome Dr. Tahani Slit. Dr. Tahani is the head of the Central Department for External Cooperation within the Ministry of Water Resources and Irrigation in Egypt, and we are happy that she joined us, although she got the invitation very late, but she managed to be with us. Dr. Tahani.
Thank you very much, Dr. Emad, and thank you very much for all of you to sustain with us until this time. It's not easy, we totally understand. I'll try to tackle our subject from the regional perspective. Because when we talk about climate change and climate change adaptation in the Nile, we talk about 11 countries like our colleagues have just said. So we cannot talk about a country per se. We have to tackle this on the regional level and on the basin level. The Nile system is one of Africa's most important ecosystems since it hosts 40% of Africa's population. And as the situation in Africa, the Nile Basin is a victim of climate change impact, although it hasn't contributed too much in it. Actually, not climate change in its simple form, like rising temperature and associated repercussions, but the Nile Basin is also suffering from climate seasonal, spatial, and temporal variability. So this adds more complexity to the nature of the Nile Basin. Due to its size and varying climate and topographies, the Nile Basin constitutes one of the most complex river basins around the world. The complexity results in different interests of the rivers. Some are prioritizing water for agriculture, some are prioritizing water for hydropower, and here is our main problem: the different interests in the same resources. So how we can tackle this? Climate change makes it more complex. Demographic increase makes it even more complex. So really the Nile Basin is a case that should be studied very thoroughly and very sensitively. Moreover, the basin communities have limited ability to cope with the negative impacts of climate variability. Until now, we lack capabilities. We need capacity building to tackle our problems. Moreover, it's noted that a number of global climate models suggest a wetter climate in East Africa and a greater likelihood of decreasing rainfall as one gets closer to the Mediterranean coast. Given the very wide range of predictions, however, it's not possible to draw a firm conclusion whether the water in the Nile will increase or decrease. Until now, many models depends on the models. When we use a certain model and a certain scenario, the outcomes will be different. So we have to be prepared to all possibilities. And this is the main challenge, to be prepared to an increase and to a decrease. Not only this, but also to the possibilities of upstream actions that might have their impact on downstream as well. We have also many other climatic issues like the El Nino and La Nina, the El Nino Southern Oscillation, and it has been proved scientifically that it has an impact on the Nile basin flow, especially on the eastern Nile. Also, the intertropical convergence zone would critically affect the weather patterns in the Nile region. As a result, the projection of change in the weather at regional level differs very substantially from model to model. What all models agree on is a rise in temperature. Further increase in temperature, although the magnitude of change is varying as well. For rainfall, however, not only does the magnitude differ substantially between the models, but also the direction of change. There is scientific consensus that the region can expect an increase in frequency and severity of extreme events like floods and droughts and heat waves, and an intensification of natural variability. Although subject to many uncertainties, the impact of climate change on development in the Nile region can be expected to be diverse and significant. The socioeconomic consequences of climate change in the basin will be severe, and we exacerbated the impacts of existing challenges. Climate change will have a number of additional cascading effects on agriculture, on fisheries, on energy, on health, disaster, and freshwater ecosystems. Tangible socioeconomic effects in the Nile basin include the sea level rise that will seriously threaten the delta. The problem of flooding is compounded by land subsidence. It's estimated that 1 meter of sea level rise could cause a loss of 4,500 square kilometers of cropland and displace about 6 million people in the Nile Delta. Warming of water and changing in water level pose a threat to fisheries, livestock, and agriculture, resulting in a widespread negative impacts on economy, on food security, on future economic growth. The hydropower potential of the Nile is large, but also vulnerable due to changes in river flows driven by climate change. The vast majority of existing infrastructure as well as projects under planning or constructions haven't been designed for climate resilience and could experience serious harm. Wetlands, which provide beneficial water filtration, are highly vulnerable to climate change, calling into question the continued quality of water in the basin. Degradation of livelihood through climate change may accelerate and intensify cross-border and rural-urban migration. High rates of urbanization that are triggered by the above factors are placing increased pressure on already stressed urban and peri-urban ecosystem services, health systems, and food security. The challenges emanating from climate change in the Nile basin include uncertainty as regards precipitation and river flows and land degradation. Additional challenges are the lack of sufficient institutional capacity and networking, inadequate climate variability monitoring and response mechanism, lack of communication between science and policy communities, and inadequate technical capacity that is needed to cope with climate change-related impacts. Not all countries in the Nile Basin have a water policy, let alone a comprehensive water policy, so how about regional policies? Although climate change has a fundamental role for water management, reforms in the water sector in the Nile Basin region often have very weak links to climate. Vulnerable sectors to impact of climate change in the Nile region were identified as agriculture, water, energy, and ecosystems, and the identification for needs for adaptation to climate change, including satisfying access to water. National level measures, while playing critical role in their own right, can sufficiently address the basin-wide and transboundary climate change impacts and threats of shared waters. We have been through a lot. There was a project called Adapting to Climate Change-Induced Water Stress in the Nile Basin that started in March 2010, which has an objective. It was a partnership between UNEP and the Nile Basin Initiative, and the project from 2009 to 2012, and was focused on the river basin. The overall project goal was to build the resilience of the ecosystem. The results and information emanating from the project were expected to support policy areas and decision makers in the Nile Basin region, and in addressing myriad complexities. Additionally, the results from the project were to lead to increase the cooperative management of the common Nile Basin water resources. Moreover, UNEP with DHI developed an assessment methodology including themes, tools, and criteria and indicators for selected hotspots. The Global Water Partnership with NBI were both responsible for building capacities of the government agencies, research institutions, non-governmental organizations, and so on. The national adaptation plans of action and the early warning system being developed in the Nile Basin countries represent a substantial effort, but are insufficient to prepare effectively for a changing climate given the scale of the threat. The basin-wide climate strategy was prepared in 2013 by the NBI, setting out the NBI's approach for a joint transboundary river basin level response to support climate-compatible water resources development in Africa, and it had 5 objectives. But we have strategies. The papers are very well written, very well. We have all what it needs in paper. But the real issue is implementation. And this cannot happen without having inclusiveness, being all together, taking all the differences apart and continue together, and to have a good political will. The climate change adaptation measures will be most effective when undertaken in a coordination with other riparians. As examples, we talk about joint measures to enhance the collective adaptive capacity, including coordinated reservoir operation, promoting agricultural trade among the countries and between the basin and other regions, interconnecting power and transport system, developing joint mechanism for resource solicitation for climate change program and conducting joint research. Common no-regret measures mostly focus on coordinated infrastructure development, building human and institutional capacities. Preparing for climate change requires taking action at local, national, basin-wide, and global levels. The size of the basin, combined with cultural, political, socio-economic, and climate diversity, argues for applying the subsidiary principle, which means allowing the smallest, lowest, or least centralized competent authority to take the lead role in the implementing adaptation measures. In a system with multiple reservoirs, such as the Nile Basin Reservoir operation, has to be coordinated to maximize total system benefits and mitigate the effects of extreme weather events, as floods and droughts, in a coordinated system. Developing optimal release policies under these circumstances will require close day-to-day cooperation among the riparian states. Then, given the spatial variability of farming practices, dominant crops, soils, and other agricultural and climatic factors in the basin, it's likely that very severe droughts with extremely negative impacts will happen on a regional scale rather than a basin-wide scale. Hence, transboundary cooperation that strengthens inter-basin agricultural trade could mitigate the impact of periodic droughts and bring about a certain level of food security. To close, I just want to invite you all on the 14th to transfer from policy to action and to come with us to launch an initiative championed by Egypt called AWARE. AWARE stands for the Action for Water Resilience, and this initiative is transforming talk to action with a focus on Africa and, of course, on the Nile Basin. Thank you very much, and sorry for being long.
Thank you very much, Dr. Tahani. This was a very good overview and also reminding us of all the different aspects that we have to take into consideration while we are looking at the regional strategies for the Nile Basin. Now I have the honor and pleasure to invite my friend, colleague, Mr. Ayenio Tissera Fenta. He is the acting Nile Basin Discourse Regional Manager. And again, we will hear, I have to welcome Her Excellency Dr. Laila Skandar, who is joining us. Thank you, please, very much, thank you. Please, Minister, join us. Ayenio will give us also the perspective from the Nile Basin Discourse as a regional civil society organization. Please, you have the floor.
Thank you, Dr. Emad, the founder and the former leader of the Nile Basin Discourse, who really brought NBD to a height. So, Dr. Emad, we have really a great honor and appreciation to your leadership and contribution to NBD. Ladies and gentlemen, good evening. The previous speaker has given us the perspective of the Nile Basin Initiative to deal with climate hazards, bring resilience throughout the Nile Basin. So, and the Nile Basin Discourse also brings perspective from the grassroots communities and civil societies angle. So the topic I'm supposed to speak on is somehow very loaded and very diverse, but I will try to give a very summarized highlight as to what NBD has been doing in strengthening resilience, adaptation, and mitigation at community, national, sub-basin, and river basin levels. This one, okay. Just a few words about NBD. Dr. Emad has already highlighted it. We are a network of civil society organizations with over 600 members across 11 Nile Basin countries, with 10 active national discourse forums, with the exception of Eritrean chapter, which is not currently active. So we give an interface between grassroots communities and policymakers at government and intergovernmental levels, bringing a range of issues: climate, water resource management, agriculture, and a lot. how do we do? We have 3 communication pipelines. The top-down communication pipeline. This is an approach we use to inform communities as to what type of policies, programs, strategies are being designed by governments and intergovernmental organizations. So we inform communities on what type of climate mitigation and adaptation strategies are countries designing. We have bottom-up communication pipeline when we bring insights from communities. What are communities thinking about? What are their priorities, their views, their concerns, problems, all within communities. So we package information and bring that to policymakers to inform their policies and strategies for climate and other development interventions. We also follow a horizontal approach, horizontal communication pipeline, where we bring communities together to share knowledge, information, and also build capacities of each other within a country and across boundaries. We have used it to bring so many communities across territories to sit together, discuss on common challenges, and design common solutions for their problems. So now, the question is, what has been the role of NBD in strengthening climate resilience, adaptation, and mitigation at all levels? Communities, NBD's primary targets for action are communities. Communities are our primary targets. Why? We have reasons for this. Reason number 1 is that community-level actions are key scale of intervention in the effort to address serious environmental challenges. Communities, whether small or large, are hubs of experimentation for traditional methods and techniques. They have knowledge, they know how to deal with issues, so we have to, amaze those methods and techniques. Community-level actions can act as demonstration site of resilience, adaptation, and intervention in the face of environmental challenges. So we strongly believe in the power of local community solutions for climate hazards, and for that matter, for any development interventions. Within the larger group of community, we focus on women and youth. Why? Literature tells us that women and girls are disproportionately affected by climate change because of their gendered socioeconomic roles. And yet they are less equipped to deal with these hazards, again because of obvious reasons. A study from UN Water, recent study, indicates us that only about 50 countries have laws or policies that specifically mention women's participation in the water resource management and rural sanitation. Again, a study from WHO and UNICEF indicated that women and girls are responsible for fetching, collecting water, where there is no even water within the premise. And they have to travel a long distance. What if that water source, even from the distance, it disappeared? It means far greater impact on women. FAO's study tells us that women contribute 50% of agricultural labor, and yet their productivity is much less than that of male farmers. So because of these reasons, we focus on women and youth within the largest community group. Now, what has NBD done so far to women and youth? We provide a series of capacity building trainings on a number of issues, on knowledge, to equip them knowledge and skills on policy influencing, communication, resource management, entrepreneurship to create green jobs. So we believe that if they are provided with adequate knowledge and skills, women and girls would be front leader change makers in their communities towards bringing climate resilience and nature-based solutions to climate adaptation. Evidence from the ground, I just highlight the real evidence from the ground. The training is NBD provided to women and youth. This is one of the trainings in Burundi on water for environmental sustainability with focus on integrated flood and drought mitigation. We have several trainings provided to women and youth in almost 10 Nile Basin countries. These are just few examples. As Dr. Emad said, NBD served for over 20 years, so I cannot bring all those achievements within these 5 minutes. So our engagement does not stop at community level. We also engage national governments. NBD engaged national governments of the riparian countries to promote water for sustainable development and climate resilience. This is, for instance, NBD engaging the government of Uganda on fast-tracking the SDGs, particularly SDG 6 and 13. People who know Uganda, most part of Uganda is green, but there are certain areas which are degraded and prone to climate change, especially in the north. So that people in that area need food, people in that area need drinking water. So water infrastructure, food facilities. And then to treat that area, we have to treat its upper catchment. That is why we involved stakeholders in tree planting, especially school children, a young generation, tomorrow's leaders. This is, again, NBD's engagement with the government of Burundi. Assessment shows us that one of the critical problems in Burundi is shortage of drinking water. You can see people and jerry cans, lining up, and mothers and children are also suffering from health problems because of lack of drinking water and sanitation, proper sanitation. So the proposal was that there should be water infrastructure. When we say water structure, it doesn't mean that mega hydropower or what projects. It can be very simple construction of ponds. It can be digging water boreholes. It can be roof water harvesting. So building water infrastructure is building capacity to withstand climate hazards. Again, another engagement of government in Rwanda in sustainable management of the Nile River Basin, especially the need for bringing together stakeholders for joint planning and action. Again, I'm very conscious of time elements. So this is our engagement at sub-basin level, engaging 2 or more states that share sub-basins, like Kagera River, for instance, sharing between Burundi, Rwanda, and Tanzania, Mara River between Tanzania and Kenya, and a lot other sub-basins. This is our engagement at basin level, using different platforms that are created by the Nile Basin Initiative and all that. And this is even NBD's engagement at the global level to showcase what NBD is doing on the ground and advocating for climate resilient communities within the Nile Basin. Thank you very much.
Thank you, INU. You gave us some ideas about how we are, I'm trying to focus on the unintended consequences, and I think that what you have been trying to tell here, that if we make this dialogue between the different stakeholders at the different level, at the sub-regional level, at the regional, and then at the national, that we try to avoid as much as possible this unintended consequences, because this is the only way that we can have sustainable development and not to have development that will be not sustainable on the long run. Let me go for the coming presenter, and we still try to take it from the holistic approach before I go to the national level. I would like to invite Dr. Ismail Abdelghalil. Dr. Ismail Abdelghalil is a senior advisor for the Egyptian Sustainable Development Forum in Egypt, but with his experience and knowledge about the issue at the global, at the regional level. We have invited him also today to say a few words about this. I know we are running out of time, Dr. Ismail, but and I'm sorry, as you are my senior advisor, so I would like you to take care of the timing, please. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Emad. I was asked actually to talk for 5 minutes. And that's why I will limit myself to this time. I'm very happy also to talk about this topic. Unintended consequences. Unintended consequences. It is a very nice excuse for the policy failures, but it's also wise from us to be proactive, just to avoid late sorry. Late sorry will not help. And that's why I will talk about one of those late sorry triggered by FAO. If you are in my age, I am over 70, okay? You may remember that campaign initiated by FAO under the call Green Revolution. Green Revolution actually resulted in genetic erosion for indigenous and wild breeds in the Nile Basin. Because of this, actually, and because of the campaign now to achieve the first and the second goal of the SDGs, the smallholder farmers popularized the use of hybrids, hybrid seeds of high yield varieties. That result actually in the genetic erosion of the indigenous and wild breeds, which are more adaptable to the climate, the local climate, and that actually ended up by losing treasures of genetic material in our area. And that's why I think this topic is to come back to the local varieties in the Nile Basin and supported by the local communities by establishing small seed banks, okay, because as far as I know, okay, from my experience, that in Ethiopia and in Kenya and all this area, okay, treasures of genetic material that could help actually to produce more adaptable hybrids to or breeds to the climate extremes. I think this is actually my proposal, and I would actually be very happy if at the regional level we could have a regional seed bank accessible for benefit sharing between the members of or our members in the Nile Basin. I think I have already made the 5 minutes, and ready also for any questions. I actually, I would have more time to talk about the role of the traditional knowledge. We are keep talking about governance, digital governance. While we are here in Egypt and I think also in the Nile Basin countries, governance by ethics. We have the Bedouins by us actually devised systems to manage rangeland in deserts, which is a very harsh condition. By we call it ORF. ORF, it's unwritten law. It is preserved by inheritance from generation to the other and highly respected. And I'm sure that there are some other traditional knowledge prevailing in the Nile Basin. We have to focus on that and make use of this governance created by inheritance, okay, to challenge the climate change. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ismail. I heard from you three very important messages. Number one, that we have to follow the no-regret policies, that we don't regret later after the lessons that we have learned before from previous experience. I also got at least from you some ideas for the future. The idea of the regional seed bank, it's one of the things that we have also to think about it, and this could be something that could be raised by the governments of the MBI or the Nile Basin to think about it in the future. Now I have the honor to invite Dr. Ahmed Hassan Al-Amin, the representative of the Ministry of Water Resources and Irrigation in Sudan. You are most welcome, Dr. Al-Amin, and you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I think this is a good opportunity for me to reflect some knowledge and some experience related to MBI. I will go inside directly. We have now ongoing project related to MBI, funded by the World Bank and through SIWA Trust Fund. And now the working with this project now already undergoing almost I think two year or maybe almost two year, have like 4 or 5 thematic area working with the climate change as a climate change. The project title called Nile Basin Cooperation for Climate Change Resilience. This thematic area, 4 or 5, one of them like cooperation platform for the whole Nile Basin countries. The second one related to flood and drought, and already have like a good opportunity to make like resilience, proper resilience for the effect or impact for climate change. The other one, the third one, related to the water quality, measurement and monitoring regularly, install and support like laboratory, national laboratories for the whole countries, 11 countries, and make like a station to monitor this water quality in the whole basin. And after that, regularly to make like database website. If you need anything, just go into the website. The fourth one, related to like make like innovative information service for the climate resilience. It means like proper way to record and make like a historical something related to the Nile Basin. It means like successful project, like maybe we follow next time or maybe in the future. The whole things for this project is already under like, take it in the project, the environmental impact assessment and gender aspect and climate change insight aspect also, and whole things properly well, and now the actually starting the monitoring for the SAM station for the whole Nile Basin station, even in Sudan now already installed and work well, and have like some result is already now seeing the result for the local community in this side. Have some challenge, regional challenge, because until now for the Nile Basin, for the whole Nile Basin, the first challenge related to the data exchange protocol. Until now not have a like proper way to exchange data between the countries, and it is like very big challenge. The other challenge related to capacity building and for the technical staff or technical people working with these things. I think that is all for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Ahmed. At least the challenges that you have mentioned at the end, they are also things that we have to take it as ideas that could be also raise some discussion later on. Now I go down to at the national level from the very two examples that we have, Sudan and Egypt, and I'm very proud to welcome Dr. Ismail Ghezuli from the Sudanese Environment Conservation Society. If you want to make your presentation from here, Dr. Ismail, you can do it while you are sitting. Okay. Dr. Ismail is going to tell us about the impacts of climate change and the case of Sudan, the case study of Sudan. I'm trying always to remind everyone that we are talking about, and to have the link with the unintended consequences of the actions that we can do for the climate change. Please, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, and thanks are also extended to organizers and to you who are still at late waiting for this very important event. As all of you know, that Africa or the Nile Basin especially, is very rich in its natural resources, if it is not the richest. That include fauna and flora, include forestry, fishery, and all these natural resources. But unfortunately, our usage of these gifted resources has been spoiled and depleted by us human beings. And so, as even also IPCC in its fourth report mentioned that Africa is the most vulnerable continent. From that point, I don't want to talk about Africa, but only about Nile Basin, which include about 11 countries. And I want to talk about 4 areas which are most vulnerable, which is water demand, water supply, storage reservoir, and finally, electricity generation. The current demand is only about 94% of what we have. It's about 15, but in 290 we expected that our demand will be about 52, and if we add the evaporation, it will be about 59 using certain models. As I said, vulnerability, I will confine myself, although there are a lot of vulnerabilities, whether on human being or animal resources, but I will confine myself on the water resources in the basin line. In the water demand, how does projected water demand for productive activities compare to forecasted water supply? We want to compare the demand and supply. In supply, what will be the estimated impact of climate change on future river flows of the Nile and the major wadis? Water storage, will the water storage levels in the main reservoir be adversely affected by climate change? Hydropower generation, will the potential of hydro-based electricity generation be adversely affected by climate change? We did a detailed study on these 4 areas, and we have the following details. We have in our scenarios use a base scenario and another scenario with 2% growth in population and agriculture. And as you see from the graph here, we have in 2050, we will have this red graph, and in 290, it is expected that about 11% water will be increased relative to the base year condition, which is now. As I said, we use 2% which is a modest growth for water, for population, and for irrigated agriculture for the supply. And in both scenarios, which is a base year or 250 and 290, we measure it at Marawi, and we find that if the annual peak flows is 400 billion cubic meter, peak annual flows are about 20% less in under 290 scenario. And it will be 30% when we measure it in the Blue Nile near Khartoum, which should be 30% less than the level under 2090 as a baseline. Also, water storage, we have 2 scenarios, one at 2090 and one at 50 scenario. Both scenarios are below the baseline, so the storage facilities will be less at that 2 scenarios. Hydropower generation also will be affected. Also, if we have the black graph as baseline, both scenarios at 250 and 290, there will be the generation compared to the baseline are affected. So I want to jump, because there is no time, directly to the conclusions and recommendation. I have 2 main recommendations. One regarding capacity building, enhance capacities of regional meteorological stations to monitor hydroclimatic variables. We strengthen the capacity of water planners to implement modern concept of integrated and adaptive water resource management. The other main recommendation, I don't know whether it is not been seen here, that full cooperation and coordination between the Nile basin countries through the Nile Basin Discourse and through Blue Nile Initiative. So because we are talking about water, we have to talk about irrigation, and we have to talk about agriculture. We have a special recommendation for these issues. Small-scale agricultural practices, water supply. We have to introduce new water harvesting, spreading techniques like spiral spring technique, like in our country, like these small dams and other techniques. Improved access to groundwater, because the Nile water will not be enough, both for rural household and animal resources. Water demand, also promotion of greater use of effective traditional water conservation practices, because we consume water in a non-conservative way. So we need water efficiency, and so that we can avail water for the next generation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Doctor, for this overview. And I'm happy to see also, and this is also something that I always try to convince our stakeholders and our partners, that civil society organizations, they also have the capacity to do studies and research and to have, good research on issues that are affecting us, especially when it comes to climate change. Last but not least, we'll listen for a few minutes from Dr. Ahmed Zaki from the National Discourse Forum in Egypt. Actually, Dr. Ahmed, he comes from Aswan, and he's going, I'm sure he knows that we are running out of time and we have only a couple of minutes before we open the floor for the discussion. So I would like to hear from you very quickly about your intervention here. Dr. Ahmed, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good evening, all, and welcome in Egypt. Egyptian Nile River National Discourse Forum is a network of Egyptian civil society organizations established in 2003 to help society participation in local community about Nile River development. Furthermore, in Egypt, we have 26 local discourse forums in different Egyptian governorates, from Aswan in South Egypt up to Alexandria in North Egypt. Member organizations of Egyptian Discourse Forum, national and or local, are working in a range of environment, agriculture, energy, gender, poverty reduction, and climate change. The activities of Egyptian Nile Discourse Forum working in awareness about safe of energy, food, and water, as well as mechanism to adapt into the negative effects of climate change. According, the Egyptian National Discourse Forum organized a national and local activities to exchange knowledge, experience, and the best practice in issues related to the negative effects of climate change in Egyptian water resource, drought, and food. These activities resulted in a number of recommendations, including: number one, organizing awareness-raising workshop in climate change issue, especially in the climate change negative and negation and adaptation policies. Number two, exchanging experience with local communities in the Egyptian governorate through the integration and participation of farmers and women in the activities in program of association. Number 3, organizing field visit and capacity building activities in the field of water management, climate change, early warning, and risk reduction. Number 4, cooperation and networking between civil society organizations to carry out joint activities. Number 5, development activities meeting to the new mechanism to adapt with the negative effect of climate change. Again, development traditional cultivation methods to the new mechanism to adapt with the negative effects of climate change. Number 6, development of crop traditional irrigation method to modern irrigation system to adapt with the negative effects of climate change. Finally, I support, much support the Dr. Ismail Abdel Jalil proposal for established the regional bank seed for using in breeding program for plant and animal for resulted in new varieties adapted with the climate change. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ahmed. I'm happy to hear that they already covered some of the activities that the National Discourse Forum in Egypt is doing, and I know that we have only 10 minutes before we finish, or even less. Let me open the floor if we have any questions. I have one there. Please come. Do we have a mic here? And also, I know that Dr. Tahani would like to make a point. Yeah, in the discussion, yes. يا جماعة ممكن نحرك بسرعة شوية. Yes, and there.
Hello, thank you so much for such an interesting talk, very rich. This is Zainab Ali. I'm a radio announcer in the Egyptian English station. Also, I'm a master's candidate at the American University in Cairo, and my master's is on the Nile Basin water share, the equitable use of the water share. So my question is about how, or what is the best way to tackle the water share, the equitable utilization of the Nile water, and how is it a policy approach, or is it like we've seen a lot of negotiations being like failing in the past couple of years, and is it the right solution should be policy or should be based on technical calculations, or what's your best approach to tackle the equitable utilization without causing harm? Thank you so much.
Thank you. I will see if we have, yes, we have here another question. Yes, please.
Asin Zia here, professor from University of Vermont. Really interesting panel. I have a question about the challenges of water quality because of the climate change, and there's like a lot of upstream dams that are being built, then deforestation, mining, and the data from the Nile River doesn't show like very nice pictures. When we project the future climate change with the warming, the water quality looks very bad. And I was wondering if there was any discussions going on about cooperative approaches to address this issue, because it's not just water quantity, water quality is more important for securing the life and food as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Do we have any more questions? Okay. Is that here? Okay. Yes, please.
Hi, hello everyone. My question is, how can we enhance the collaboration of the countries within the Nile Basin in order to reach to, the minimized level of unintended consequences of climate change adaptation and mitigation?
Thank you very much. We have 3 questions now, and I would like to see the panelists if anyone would like to respond to this. At least the first one on what would be the right solution policy. Oh, Dr. Okay, Dr. Tan, تفضل, please.
Thank you very much for the very interesting and inviting questions to talk, and thank you, Dr. Emad, for giving me the floor. I will talk about the first and the third question on equitable share and how can we enhance collaboration, because the two questions actually are interlinked. And here I'd like to also shed light on the presentation done regarding the activity of Nile Basin Initiative in climate change adaptation. Well, it's very important to note that shared river basins and the management of shared river basin should be controlled by international water law. And the international water law is very clear on many principles. One of the principles are prior notification, reasonable and equitable utilization, and the doing of no harm or significant harm. These are the main principles that should control any transboundary basin. And when it comes to the Nile, with the complexity of the Nile, and I don't know who of you have the history of the Nile Basin and the Nile Basin Initiative, but here as a representative of the Ministry of Water Resources and Irrigation, I'd like to shed light on the inclusiveness, and I was clear when in my presentation regarding the inclusiveness, having everybody on board in an organization. If a river basin organization doesn't include all the riparian countries, then it is lacking much and it cannot represent the whole basin. Especially for our case in Egypt, which is we are in the most downstream and we are dependent, 97% of our water are coming from upstream countries, so from outside of our borders. So equitable share or equitable share is not the proper word. It's equitable and reasonable utilization. But sharing, meaning that you give shares to everybody, it's not possible because we have green water, we have blue water, and we have a country that has many other resources, and we have a country that doesn't have any other resources. So shares is not something that we should look on, but two things: equitable and reasonable utilization and cooperation, and this is what we are talking about with our colleague here. So in every river basin organization, and we have many examples in Africa and outside of Africa as well. We have the OMVS on the Senegal River, we have the Zambezi, the Orange, Senku, and all the rivers in Africa are controlled by many principles. Any project that should be established on a river basin should be notified by all the river basin, and you give time, and you give studies, and you give time to elaborate and discuss this project before the implementation. So this is one of the main principles and one of the main rules on which we should rely on in river basin organizations. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Tahani, for that. Who else from the panel would like to respond to? We heard something about the water quality, which is, I think it's very important, Dr. Ismail. The question about, we are always talking about the water quantity in the Nile Basin, but also the quality is an issue. So would like to say, please go ahead. Dr. Ahmed, Faddal.
Yes. For the water quality in previous, maybe not so far from now, have like just touch it, not have like proper way to use to process or to treat it, or because already have a many impact nowadays, not in the whole basin, even in Sudan. For example, Sudan have a many problem related to the mining process, related to the domestic waste and not treated, and also going to discharge for the Nile. Going for like very important things should be firstly knowing the problem, and after that looking for the how to solve it. If you properly monitoring and measure it, and after that maybe analysis, and you will find a good way to form it and success to solve the problem. In this problem, have some part not lively belong to climate change, but the other part belong or touch the climate change in the other part. It means like sediment, like erosion process, and flooding area, or already flood area, coming like a mining area, have some flood that already flushing this hazardous waste and going to discharge to Nile. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ahmed. I know that we are already 8 o'clock and everyone is ready to go and have some rest or have dinner or whatever. But I would also take where's the young lady who asked about who's doing her master's? Yeah, okay, you are sitting there. I'm the chair. I'm not supposed to speak on behalf of the panelists, but one of the things that the MBD, when it was created, and I was part of the founding group in the beginning in 2001, actually. The whole idea was how that the civil society could give a model of cooperation among the Nile citizens. And this is why we gave ourselves the slogan of One Nile, One Family. And the idea of one Nile, one family, this means that we could discuss together how we can have a sustainable development in the Nile Basin that is good for everyone, that is win-win, that is not affecting anyone, because I'm developing myself, I don't hurt other people. So that's the whole idea of this Nile Basin discourse was about, is how we can together work on a policy or decisions that will make everyone happy, and not to make some are happy and some are not happy. So when you talk about is it policy or technical, definitely you need to have the technical expert. You need the science. You need the people who tell you how we can do it. But at the end of the day, if you have two options, you have to take the options that will make everyone happy. You don't take the option that will make some are okay and some are not okay. And this is also some of the unintended consequences that we could have from the Nile Basin, and I'm happy that this is also part of the closing. But I wanted also, I was expecting that Dr. Beach will say something about the quality before, because he talked in his presentation, he talked about the issue of the consequences that are very much linked to the quality. So I want to hear from him, and if Michael wants to raise his point, I will leave it to him. If Michael Schools, okay, I can say what he wants to raise. But anyway, go ahead, Dr. Beats. Can you switch on?
Oh, yes. Thank you, Dr. Emad. And well, first, speaking to the other question, I think reinforcing what you just said. I mean, one of the vital points about addressing unintended consequences is that it's important not to be making decisions based on a subset of sectors or a subset of the impacted region, or that's when you're more than likely going to have unintended consequences on sectors or regions outside of what you're using, what you're basing your management decision on. And then back to the water quality question, again, I think that's where it gets at the importance of thinking about, for instance, if you're allocating more water to agriculture, but then you're expanding agriculture near the water basin, that's resulting in fertilizer runoff and pesticide runoff and other things that are impacting water quality. I mean, that's to your point. I mean, and water quality may be getting impacted already with rising temperatures and climate change, and so, I mean, basically, I very much agree that as you're making decisions, you'd want to think about, you're allocating water to agriculture. Along with that, well, how are you managing the agriculture so that you don't have increased fertilizer and pesticide runoff, and then downstream water quality issues. So I don't know if that answers the question, but I agree that it's really that's the kind of thinking that's a vital part, I think, of this this discussion on unintended consequences, that you're thinking about not only in that case, for instance, agricultural productivity, but also what does it mean for water quality and other water users.
Hope this was, I think, covers the point that you raised. Okay, I know that there is still, Professor Skoulos, he is going to raise a point that if he, put it in a comment. Sorry, to ask you for that.
Okay, I may raise an obvious question. One of the biggest problems we know all over the world is how the Renaissance Dam is going to be filled, and in which way, in which logic, where and how actually the action, the situation, the climate change itself raises an issue there. And I put the question, and I cannot give the answer. The answer is what you said. It is the only way we can do it is without damaging others in the region.
Thank you very much, Professor Skoulos. That was a very good comment to close with. But let me, before I close, I would like to thank the organizers, the partners. This was a very good model of cooperation. I personally feel, I feel so proud of having this session done. And I have to thank Robin, especially Robin, because of she have done to make this happen. It was to organize a side event. Robin from RTI, to organize a side event within the COP, it is not an easy task, because you have to have a lead organization, and then you have a merge with two organizations, and then you have to compete with time, space, and many things. But at the end of the day, the partnership that was created between the RTI and the Sudanese Environment Conservation Center Society and RAED, my organization, the Arab Network for Environment and Development, with the support of MBD, with the support of the government of Egypt, the government of Sudan. This was actually an excellent model that we received everything. Everyone said okay to come, and it was very fruitful and also very rich. I know it is difficult to cover an issue like this in 1.5 hours, but at least we succeeded to discuss and open up some points and some issues that we have to take into consideration. The good thing about the COP that it is always, I say, it is the beginning. Once we start talking about something, we have to continue doing it. I hope RTI and SEX and RAED and MBD that we will continue doing something. If we think about how we can build on this and unintended consequences that we don't want to see in the Nile Basin, and hopefully you will agree that the four of us will work together to do at least something else, not to wait until the United Arab Emirates, the COP28, but maybe before that also we do something together. Anyway, the last thank will be for the audience here who came, and I'm happy to see all this variety from the different parts, from Africa, from Arab region, from Europe, or from United States as well. Asia as well. So I'm happy to have all of you here. Thank you very much for coming, and thanks for all the panelists. Please give them a applause of thanks. And the last thing I will ask the panelists, and also please join us to take a photo and if we have, where is Rawan? Come and have the photo. Verdi is not here. Okay, but let's have a photo.